best-selling author, fund manager, made a lot of accurate predictions. Predicted a few years ago that we'd see a larger collapse in the West than we've seen so far, but that's what a lot of other people said. I mean, we've never seen a bubble that I've studied in history get this big. That's across the board in bonds and in the currencies and just everywhere. It is la-la land, because when the music stops, it's going to be spectacular. So I want to ask him in the next segment what he thinks different scenarios are, collapses could look like. Not predictions, but what they could look like, how we can protect ourselves individually. We're going to talk about that right now in his book. But at the same time, I've just got so many questions, because I wish there was some way to stop the bubble. I mean, he makes the point that it needs to go ahead and just pop. I wish there was a way to just freeze it and then slowly deflate it. He was saying earlier it needed to pop a long time ago. That's what Ron Paul and others are saying as well. How would we have gotten out of this if we would have popped it 3, 4, 5 years ago? And how would have that been better versus now?
Well, the last good opportunity to pop it was in the aftermath of the bursting of the real estate bubble and during the financial crisis of 08, 09. Unfortunately, there was more pain that needed to be had at that time. And a lot of people who speculated should have lost a lot of money. There should have been a lot of financial institutions that should have been allowed to fail. And a lot of people should have lost a lot more money than they did. Instead, the middle class suffered, and a lot of the wealthy people who gambled so badly with cheap money from the government were rewarded for all their risk-taking, and now they're taking even more risk. But, you can't just slowly deflate a bubble. Right? You gotta let it pop. That is the problem, because the bubble, the activities that comprise the bubble are preventing legitimate economic activity from taking place. So as the Fed directs resources or misdirects resources to sustaining bubbles, the resources that are necessary for legitimate economic growth, wealth creation, good paying jobs, those resources are no longer available. So the quicker the bubble pops, the better. The problem is the political, carnage here is too much for anybody to want to own up to. So instead, we kick the can down the road. But, we're rapidly running out of road, and that can is, getting bigger and bigger.
Certainly well said. And, I mean, obviously, it needs to pop. It should have popped. Folks don't want the political pain. But when it does collapse, what do you expect it to look like? I mean, a lot of the public really are spoiled brats, and it's so wrong to take taxpayer money and our children's future to bail out billionaires and yuppies and people. I mean, that really is obscene. And will they get away with another banker bailout next time that's 3, 4 times bigger? I mean, maybe they've set up a scenario where everything has to be sacrificed to this black hole.
Well, I think the one thing that will be sacrificed is the value of the dollar. And of course, everybody will suffer who is not prepared. But I think the government is already all in on this bad monetary policy. They are going to, keep this monetary pedal to the metal at all costs. So they're going to keep interest rates at 0 or practically 0. They're going to do QE4. They're going to do QE5. They're going to do everything they can to stop the real estate bubble from deflating, to stop the stock bubble from deflating, to stop the bond bubble from deflating, to keep this whole house of cards propped up as long as possible. And what they have to do is sacrifice the dollar in order to sustain everything else. But ultimately, when the dollar goes, everything goes, because it doesn't matter if you still have your money in the bond market if the money isn't worth anything, right? So once the dollar collapses, because they have to print so many of them to keep all the other bubbles from bursting, then the dollar bubble is ultimately the one that goes, and that does the most damage, because what it's going to do is dramatically increase the cost of living. I mean, the Federal Reserve is pretending there's no inflation right now, but the average American knows how much his cost of living is going up. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till the cost of living doubles, triples, quintuples or more as a result of a plunging dollar. Americans are going to see their standard of living permanently reduced in a very dramatic way.
And I would expect massive crime waves.
Well, probably. We already have, a lot of crime, but it's going to get a lot worse, especially when people start blaming somebody. We've created a society of entitlement where people just expect that they've got something coming to them and where they don't get it. When all these government benefits are no longer valuable because they don't buy anything, because there's nothing available to buy with dollars, yes, a lot of people are going to be frustrated, and they're going to take those frustrations to the streets.
Massive civil unrest, which the government, not just here, but around the world, are gearing up for. And I know, Peter, you like to say it's incompetence, but at a certain level, it's a mix of incompetence and organized thought here. Because, the Pentagon admits they're preparing for civil unrest and collapse. So do the British intel. I want to ask you about that when we come back and get into your book, what you recommend people do to protect themselves. Stay with us. Power Reviews Express is one of the biggest third-party review sites, like Yelp or any of those. And we have it embedded at Infowars.com, InfoWarsStore.com on all of our products so you can review them. And we've even been contacted by the folks over there saying we've never seen someone with a 99 across the board. And I think that shows our listeners love us. We're talking about tens of thousands of reviews. Some of the products have thousands apiece, hundreds of products at InfoWarsStore.com. It's how we fund our operation. But in the nutraceutical area, it's a 5.0. And we've had this for about 6 months, and the crew kept saying, why don't you point out the reviews at InfoWarsStore.com or InfoWarsLife.com? Look at just a few of the X2 reviews. This is from Portland, Oregon, Sue. Detoxing, so I know it's working. Want to buy some for everyone I love. Waking up, not hungry, and alert. Looking forward to what's coming next. Could feel the toxins being pulled out of my hands. No ibuprofen in a week. Blood pressure down. In a good mood. If you care about your health, order some today. These are third-party reviews, folks. We don't make medical claims as a nutraceutical. It is pure, earth-sourced iodine. Not the stuff out of the ocean. Not the stuff mixed with a bunch of other crap. Not the stuff that tastes horrible and eats holes in your stomach. Your thyroid is full of bad halogens, fluoride, bromine, all this other crap. Why do they say seafood's good for you? It's got some iodine in it. And we're selling out of it. We've had it out for a few years. People just absolutely love it. That's just one of the reviews. Here's one more. We'll go back to our guest. This is from Gaming.org, New Mexico, USA. This product is everything said about it. Warning, if you have high libido, you might want to think twice before trying it. It's that powerful. And then it just goes on. Here are these reviews. I don't want to write a lengthy review, but I will say that the product is bleeping hardcore. I lift every day, and the stuff has boosted me to a maximum energy. You have to try it. It's not just listen to reviews. It's awesome. InfoWarsLife.com. And here's the deal. Talk to your physician beforehand, because if your thyroid's full of a bunch of other bad stuff, I detoxed 2 weeks into it for about a week. It felt terrible. And then I had so much more energy. InfoWarsLife.com. And it'd be like if you didn't have vitamin C, you'd have holes in your arms and your teeth would fall out. And if you took it, it's amazing. But when you first have scurvy, you take a bunch of vitamin C, you can get sick at first. It's not rocket science. Most people are deficient in iodine. It's hard to get pure sources of it. InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. And your purchase of the books, the films, the T-shirts, the high-quality non-GMO heirloom seeds, all of it funds this media operation. We're self-funded, unlike MSNBC that gets banker bailout stimulus money, or NPR that gets taxpayer money, or the big banks that get bailout money to give the media money. We are funded by folks that believe in what we're doing and support the First Amendment, so thank you so much. Europac.net. I'm going to try to shut up and give Peter Schiff for about 15 minutes of this segment that's left. It's a long segment, the floor, to really get into what he thinks is most important, to talk about how he's protecting himself, what he's telling his clients. You can also go to Euro Pacific if you'd like to be one of his clients. I want to give him the floor so it's not just me here, a layman, asking the questions. We're going to go to him in a second. But first, since I mentioned it, because I noticed on Infowars.com a comment on one of the articles going, I just heard Jones say that Ron Paul says the stock market's going to be in trouble soon. I didn't hear that. So we'll just play the clip from last Thursday on Ron Paul's own TV show where he said it. It's all over the news. And just because people are ignorant and don't know about it doesn't mean we're lying. Here's what Ron Paul had to say.
It could be tomorrow, it could be a month, it could be a couple years from now, because it all depends on a psychological acceptance of this system. So a lot of people who are still making a lot of money know this system is not going to last, but they figure, well, if everybody else thinks it's going to last, they just keep owning bonds and buying stocks. Today they're buying stocks, and yet next week they may sell them all again. So, no, I don't think there's any way to know what the time is, but you know, after 35 years of a gigantic bull market in bonds, believe me, they cannot reverse history, and you cannot print money forever and deceive the markets forever. Eventually, the markets will rule, and that's only a question of when that will happen. And, of course, I run a little bit scared because I think there will be a day of reckoning.
Let's get your comment on that, and then I want you to cover the angles you think are most important, Peter Schiff.
Well, of course, you know, Ron Paul has been giving these warnings for a long time, as have I. You know, you remember Ron Paul was warning about the problems at Fannie and Freddie, you know, as early publicly as 2002. Of course, it took until 2008 for those warnings to come to fruition. But, you know, whenever you understand a problem, you always understand it early. And that allows your critics to claim that you're wrong, because the problem gets bigger while you're warning about it. But of course, then when it blows up, they claim that nobody could have predicted this, and they call the people who did, well, they're stop clocks. You know, they've been saying it for so long, and so who cares? But the only stop clocks are the people who constantly try to tell us that everything is fine and that the government has solved our problems and that the Federal Reserve is doing the right thing. So Ron Paul is right. I think the problem is even bigger than he's publicly letting on. I think, you know, he's afraid to really say just how bad it really is, but it is pretty bad. And yes, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. And, you know, one thing I want to point out, you mentioned before the break that you thought that this is kind of being done deliberately by our leaders, like they're set out to wreck the country. You know, our leaders are so incompetent, I don't think they can do this by design. If they actually wanted to wreck the country, we'd probably be in good shape because they would achieve the opposite. So I think it's a case, you know, it's a case of bad intentions. You know, they think they're doing the right thing, and then they get committed, and they're committed to a strategy, and they get deeper and deeper and deeper into it because they never want to acknowledge that they were wrong. So rather than admitting the mistakes, they keep on, you know, doubling down on the same losing strategy. And ultimately, it is going to blow up. And your listeners need to do something. They need to take action because we don't know when this day of reckoning is going to come. It could come next week. It could come next year. But, you know, you can either prepare too early or too late. And too late isn't going to work. So you got to be too early.
There's so many questions I could ask, but I'd like to get into what you think is front and center, what you'd like to impart to the audience. I mean, obviously, I could ask the question of if they're not trying to wreck things intentionally, they certainly profit off the crises, though, every time because they always get bailed out.
Oh, yeah, look, they never want to let a crisis go to waste. And, you know, I always remember, you know, what Harry Brown used to say about, you know, the government is great at breaking your leg and then handing you a crutch and saying, you see, without me, you couldn't walk. So, yes, the government always benefits from the poverty they caused because now the impoverished look to government for a solution. And so, yes, I mean, it's a self-perpetuating spiral where the government benefits from its own mistakes. But people have to wake up to the reality that it is the government that broke their leg. And without the government, they would have two good legs, and they wouldn't need this ridiculous government crutch. And they'd be hobbling around on it and thanking the government for this crutch, when instead of, you know, they could thank the free market for having two healthy, strong legs that, you know, where they wouldn't need any kind of crutch. But that's not going to happen, right? We're going to have this crisis. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing your listeners can do about it. We can't stop it, but we can certainly prepare for it ourselves and limit the damage to ourselves so that we're in a position to help clean up the mess.
When could we have stopped it? When could we have stopped it?
You and me? Never. They're not going to take us seriously. We're going to be relegated to the fringes.
Sure, but I meant the system. I mean, if they weren't insane, when could they have currently, what would smart economic policy be from your perspective? No one could deny free markets. Only problem is it creates so much wealth, our kids become spoiled brats. I mean, communism is a joke. Socialism is a disaster. Free market creates just over-the-top wealth, prosperity, choices. And so that's why every spoiled, rotten, college kid who hadn't worked in 3 generations badmouths it because they're idiots. But, so many spoiled, rotten kids are part of the communist brigades now, literally here in Austin, marching around with red flags. It's hilarious if it wasn't so scary. I mean, I'm kind of ranting here. It's just free market works so good. Why aren't we doing it? And meanwhile, the free market's getting blamed for people that aren't following it.